atmosphere. The Zulu people were the first people to know something that is now attributed to Albert Einstein, namely that space and time are one and the same thing. Zulus knew that long before Einstein was born. They said that one other Zulu name for space is Umkhati. Umkhati, U-M-K-H-A-T-H-I, Umkhati. And they called time Isikati. So you can see, sir, that Zulus, supposedly a nation of skin-wearing primitives, were aware of the fact that space and time are one and the same thing, and further, that if you could find the river of time, you could travel into the future and into the past. And many are the ancient legends which are told in Zululand of a man who traveled through time and accidentally killed a young boy who turned out to be himself in the past, and so he no longer existed anymore.
There's an indication on the necklace, I know, around the back that the Earth is round. One of the symbols is indicating that, or a sphere.
Yes.
But I wonder what you think, Credo, of what is taught to children and students all over the world in the universities and the fancy academic centers, that actually we are now at the cutting edge of human evolution in terms of technological knowledge and knowledge of the world and the universe, and in fact back in the ancient world, in Africa and North Africa and all over South America, they were just a primitive people.
Please, that is a lot of poppycock. In fact, in my long investigation into our past, I can tell you proudly that our ancestors were 20 times cleverer than we are. What I feel and what I think, sir, is that in the past, human beings were cleverer than we are today, and that human beings knew more than we know now. We are not progressing, Mr. Icke. We are simply rediscovering things that were known by better men and better women than we are thousands of years ago. I wish to offer you proof of this, some of it at least. Say, there are things that I have found in my travel through the world, things that prove to me that our ancestors were highly advanced in chemistry. Our ancestors had become so clever that they could take science and reduce it to such a simple level that they were able to help hundreds of starving human beings after some traumatic happening in the past.
Let's concentrate on some of the images on the
Yes.
necklace and the symbols, because that leaves no doubt that a lot of knowledge has been around for a very much longer time than we are ever told. First of all, on the hand, I'm seeing the eye. Now, the all-seeing eye and the symbol of the eye is one the Illuminati use all the time. And it's one, of course, that was a very big symbol of ancient Egypt, the Eye of Ra and what have you. Why is that eye there on that hand?
That represents the terrible eye of the Chitauli, the eye which sees everything, the eye which knows everything. It is said that when a Chitauli dies, he passes his third eye onto his next of kin. And to the Chitauli, an eye is a very, very powerful symbol. This is the eye of the Chitauk. But there is more to these things. Here there is a hole that goes right through the copper. Now if you put water in that hole, you end up with a simple magnifying microscope, and you can see gems through that water. The magnification is amazing.
The great symbol that's pointed out again and again on the dollar bill, which is on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States,
yes,
put on there by the Illuminati, a president called Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is the all-seeing eye. And so is it your understanding that the all-seeing eye, when it's used by the Illuminati, represents this third eye of the Chetahuli?
Yes, I do. I really am sure of this. Why? Because in Africa, even ordinary human eyes are regarded as very powerful devices of magic. If an African shows you respect, he mustn't stare at you, but he must stare at a point beyond one of your shoulders. Now, we call this hlonipa, which means deny me your eyes. We believe that when emotionally roused, an ordinary human being can inflict great damage on another human being by the unseen fires that emanate from one's eyes. We believe that a Zulu warrior must never allow his dying enemy to look at him. For example, when a Zulu was killing an enemy, he used to cover that enemy's face with his shield to prevent the enemy looking upon him with his eyes and putting a curse upon him.
It's interesting, people who've experienced the Chetahuli, the reptilians, in relationship to the British royal family and others at various rituals, have said that at the point of sacrifice, the point of death in the sacrifice, that these reptilians stare into the eyes of the person dying, which would kind of fit why those warriors were very concerned about that.
Yes, sir.
What are they doing then?
We have got a ritual, sir, which covers many fields. A ritual which is called ukutata umoya, taking away the soul, where when a king is dying and he is fighting to pass on his knowledge and his courage to his successor, he would demand that the successor should stare heavily into the dying king's eyes. And also, when a creature is being sacrificed in Africa, whether it's a human being or an animal, that creature must be stared at by the sacrificer so that its spiritual characteristics are drunk in by the one sacrificing it. I have seen many times on hunting expeditions in Kenya, Tanzania, and other parts of Africa, when a lion is just about to breathe its last, the hunter, one of the hunters, will stare into the lion's eyes until the lion's eyes start glazing in death. It is drinking in the soul. We believe, sir, that the eyes are not just for seeing, that they are for taking as well.
Now, on the hand here is what looks like the symbol of the constellation of Orion. What's the significance of that?
Sir, people throughout Africa believe that the original human beings either came from Orion or the gods for whom read the Chitauri and many other alien nasties actually come from that constellation. We call it the constellation of Umhambi, the one who travels very, very far away. And we call this constellation also the constellation of Matsieng, the giant who was sent by God to this earth to create the first human beings. Matsieng was accompanied by a male lion with a very black mane, and he was also accompanied by his dog. And he traveled throughout the world. He first created the first race of human beings, and they were so stupid in appearance that he buried them alive in a cave, and then he created the next race of human beings, which was clever, and we are the descendants of that race.
Also on the hand is what we would call today the Star of David, which of course is not actually a Jewish symbol. It started being used quite relatively recently in that sense, but it's actually a symbol that's been found all over the ancient world. What's the significance of that being on the hand?
There are several interpretations of this very powerful magical symbol. We say that there are actually two universes living side by side. A female universe, which is our universe, and a male universe. And to Sanusis, these two triangles, a triangle facing downwards represents the descending female principle, and a triangle going upwards represents the rising male principle. It is a symbol of the unity of the feminine and the masculine. It is in fact the symbol, a very important symbol of duality.
Is this the kind of shape of spacecraft, etc., or flying craft that the beings from other planets were supposed to have flown in, or not?
No. This, you see, sir, there are various shapes. There are spacecrafts which are shaped like boomerangs or bows. These are very, very, very big. Then there are spacecraft which are shaped like pipes, like huge pipes roughly pointed at either end. And out of those huge pipes come these little things here. Yeah. They are carried inside these huge pipes.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Now, we could talk about this fella.
Yes.
First of all, the penis and all this stuff, that relates, I would have thought, to the penis of Osiris in Egyptian legend, and the same recurring theme. Would that be along the right lines?
We say that King Samahongo, who is represented here, yeah, the lord of all the Chitauri, call them what you will, had his penis cut off by Prince Muari, an African hero, and he replaced it with a golden one. Originally, we are told, this thing was made of gold. And now each time when we recall the story of the great marriage between human women and Chitauri men, we unite these creatures symbolically. And sometimes when the necklace is lying on the ground, we make a bed out of animal skin for these two figures, and then we lay them side by side and cover them with a small skin.
So why are the depictions of the gods, if they were reptilian, why are they not constantly reptilian? Why are they symbolized in other forms?
Because it is very, very, very forbidden to portray a Chitauli as it really is. Only in that large green head do we see a Chitauli represented more or less as it is.
So this was dictated by the Chitauli from
Yes,
the start, was it?
Yes.
All along?
It was. You are not allowed to represent the sons of the python as they really are. Then you are really in trouble. If you want to talk about the Chitauli, you must either play with shadows, you must place an image of a Chitauli against a light and project its shadow onto the wall.
So you've got a fish, I know, on the necklace as well, and fish are scaled. Is this anything to do with the symbolic representation of the Chitauli in a way that they couldn't do it openly?
Yes, there is a particular Chitauli who is called Wowane by our people. Wowane was one of the few good Chitauli, because there are also some good people amongst them. Mm-hmm. And Wowane had a brother called Mpangu. According to one of the great stories, there erupted a terrible war on the Red World where human beings had originally been created. And this war was between men and women. Yes. And in this world, men and women nearly decimated each other. But they were rescued by the Earth Mother, who sent a great Nkanyamba, that is a great dragon, to come out of the sky, to take them into its stomach and to bring them down to, not to our earth, to a beautiful watery world near the star of the red dog, Injebomvu, which the white people call Sirius, the star of anger. There, human beings were settled, but human beings started eating creatures which they found in the sea, which they thought were fishes, but which were really human beings. Human beings, we are told, started eating the Chitauli who lived in the sea, according to one story. And the Chitauli fought back against human beings. They attacked them with tornadoes. They attacked them with tidal waves, and the human race was nearly wiped out. And then two brothers, two Chitauli youths, Mpangu and Wowane, took pity upon the human race. And they went into the sky and looked for a great egg. And they hollowed out this egg, emptied its contents out, and brought the egg to that world and loaded the surviving human beings and brought them to our world here. We say that Wowane gave us the power of kingship. He brought it out of the sky. And if you notice, in many parts of Africa, ancient kings used to wear a wooden helmet with golden horns. It was true in West Africa, and it was true also in Southern Africa in the great Munumutapa Empire.
The horns representing the Chitauli.
Yes, the power of the Chitauli. Because to a Chitauli, horns are not just for goring other Chitauli as oxen gore each other. No, horns are a symbol of status, and through its horns, a Chitauli is able to communicate with human beings far across the face of the earth.
So the horns were like antennae then?
Yes, they were instruments of projecting power. In fact, it is said by storytellers that King Samahongo punishes those Chitauli who show mercy to human beings by pointing at them so that both their horns fall off their heads. And the Chitauri is therefore unable to direct human affairs through his or her horns.
It's also interesting that the descriptions of the Chitauli with the horns and sometimes the tail and stuff is very, very close to how Christians and those sort of stories have depicted the devil.
Yes, sir. And one thing that interests me is this, that depictions of the devil have subtly changed over the centuries. But there is a difference now. First, originally, the devil was depicted as a hook-nosed creature, like a caricature of a North African Moor. That was at the time when the Europeans were fighting the Moors as well as the Arabs during the Crusades. Many depictions of the devil then show the devil as having a hooked nose. And then later, somewhere in the 19th century early, the devil was depicted as an African with a snub nose, thick lips, and very dark skin. But what amazes me is that now, more than ever before, the devil is represented as a Chitauli. What concerns me, sir, is this, that these alien creatures are now about to reveal themselves, and they are making us aware of how they look like. If you look, for example, at bioscope films which were made in the 1950s, the 30s, and so on, depictions of space aliens of that time are ridiculous, very laughable, but not anymore, sir. Today, we are having films that depict the gray aliens exactly as they really are, and are we being prepared for a major event? And let me share this with you. Me, a week or so ago, and who left a rather unveiled threat about me shutting up or else my wife will die, who warned me about a certain creature called Eleazar or Melchizedek, that this creature is watching me. These people said this, that on Lake Titicaca there is a hidden beam of light coming from the sky onto the surface of that South American lake, and that on the 9th of September 1999, something very interesting is going to happen at Titicaca. Now, I'm interested to know what this is.
Well, I know from my own travels to that area that I've been there twice myself, and I do think, from my own research, Credo, that we are being prepared for these beings to openly be seen.
And being prepared this way, sir, when we do see the nasties, we are not going to react to them with the fear that we would otherwise have reacted. Because now what game is someone playing? I think, sir, that they are playing the game that whoever they are, that we should accept these beings and welcome them with open arms and make them our masters.
Yet again.
You see, sir, there has been a steady build-up in books, in children's comics, and in other things of the fact that we must accept these creatures. It started with the film E.T., where a cute little alien creature got lost on Earth and fought hard to be accepted by human beings. I think the same thing is on the cards here. The question is why?
One other thing I would just like to raise before we move into the bloodlines and their connections to the Illuminati is one thing that keeps coming up in my work is that some of these Chittahuli, these reptilians, at a high level of their hierarchy are actually white. Have you come across that?
Yes. They are not white like white people. If you take white cardboard and you soak it in dirty water, that is the color you will get. That is the color of the Chittahuli. And wait, sir, let us think carefully about this. According to African storytellers, the Chittahuli, where they dwell under the earth, where the great sun god banished them, they dwell there surrounded by great fires because their blood is cold. They freeze eternally. And so if you come across them in their caves, there are many, many cooking fires lit there.
That's interesting, with the symbolism of the devil being in the fires of hell.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And there is another thing. The Chittahuli, their eyes, terrible as they are so efficient that if a Chittahuli appears suddenly into the hot African sunlight, two things happen to him. His skin dries and blisters, and he goes totally blind. In fact, sir, there have been a strange race of aliens which have been seen in Africa, even by white people, which I think are actually Chittahuli. When you run and the thing chases you, it stops immediately when a car's headlights hit it and it becomes blind. Another thing, sir, we are told amongst our people that a Sangoma must always have a bogo. This is a sharpened wooden stick which he or she must carry at night. We are told that a sharpened stick is the only weapon by which you can kill a Chittahuli.
Well, of course, again and again as you speak, what comes to mind is the story of Dracula, Count Dracula, the stake in the heart, the blood drinker, the blood drinking, which is precisely what this Chittahooly and their crossbreed seem to be into.
But it is not just any wood that you must use against a Chittahooly. We believe that Rhodesian teak, a wood which has got a strange bitter taste, is the one type of wood that is poisonous to the Chittahooly. And down there, you see a long stick that I am carving in preparation for the year 2000. I might not be alive to see the year 2012. But these sticks, which I've been working upon for the last 5 years, is going to be the one stick which my successor will carry, and it will end in a sharp point. This wood, Rhodesian teak, is the wood that we say can actually kill a Chittahooly. And where the Chittahooly are found, you find Rhodesian teak or any other teak trees either being felled in large quantities or being pushed over by elephants. May I point out to you, sir, that many of the trees that are being destroyed in the Amazon jungle and in the southeastern Asian jungles, as well as in the African jungles, are teak, the one wood that the Chittahooly fear. And while on the subject of wood, the only mask that can protect you against a Chittahooly is a mask made of teak. And in some of the flea markets around Johannesburg, I'm seeing more and more masks carved in Mozambique and in Zimbabwe, representing a Chittahooly. The eyes are huge, round, with slits through which a person can see, and the lips are non-existent, and so is the nose. I've seen hundreds of such masks being sold by curio sellers in the streets.
One of the other things that comes up in terms of the way they look is the domed head. Now, I was in Egypt recently and saw depictions of Nefertiti and the Akhenaten family, and they had big domed heads. Is this a connection?
Yes, yes, sir. You see, we human beings tend to imitate those creatures that we call gods. It's going on even now. When African women saw white people, they named them Abelungu, which literally means the gods. And today, in America and in Africa, black women and some black men are going out of their way to give themselves hair which is European and not African in character. Now this thing it dates back thousands of years. First of all, the one race of the Chittahooly, the ones that are called Nomo or Nomo by the Dogoni people, are depicted as having beard-like growths of the same type that look like the beards of Egyptian pharaohs. They are shown having, it is said that when a Chittahooly gets very old, after tens of thousands of years, he or she develops a bone-like growth under the chin, which twists around like the horn of that kind of fish-like creature I saw in Europe in a picture called a narwhal. And this thing curls up this way. Now, Egyptian pharaohs used to wear beards like that. And some African kings wore beards like that, real beards or even false beards made out of ivory or out of the tusk of a warthog. And there was a time definitely in history when African kings as well as Egyptian pharaohs went out of their way to imitate the appearance of the Chitauri. Queens like Nefertiti had their faces misrepresented by the court painters. They looked exactly like the Chitauri as near as possible. The high cheekbones, the drooping chin, the unusually large head. African sangomas, African inyangas, ancient Egyptian pharaohs, all of them used to wear headdresses that made their heads look much larger than they actually were. If you look, say, at the crown, certain crowns worn by Egyptian kings, the whole head, the crown, is intended to be an extension of the pharaoh's head, to give the pharaoh an appearance of above average intelligence. In Africa, we had kings who favored headdresses made out of the scrotums of elephants or rhinoceroses or even buffaloes. A scrotum which was dried and made bulbous and worn on the head by the king to make his head look larger than it was. And lastly, in ancient Greece, at the time when Greece reached the great heights in its culture and civilization, the great ruler Pericles used to wear a special soldier's helmet with a bulbous skull, a helmet which made his head look much bigger than it really was.
Do they still do that today? Are there still African traditions that do that today?
Yes, very much so. And in America, some Native American shamans used to wear a special head made out of the head and the horns of a buffalo, which also made the man's head look bigger than it is. Say, popes, the Pope in Rome wears a hat which is intended to show him as having a brain bigger than average. That crown which has got three crowns, one on top of the other one. And now, bishops, especially in the Greek Orthodox Church, they wear crowns like that. And the Tsar of Russia, one of the Tsars, wore a bulbous crown which was in two sections, which made his head bigger than it really was. And in Persia, in Iran, some ayatollahs wear a turban whose effect is to make the man's head look bigger than it is. So does a Sikh. And so, for that matter, to the ancient priests of Israel, they also wore an onion-shaped headdress, whose impression was to give him a far and above size head.
Aren't there also traditions in which they manipulate children's heads as they're growing so that they become more bony-like?
Yeah. During my travels in Africa, I came across an amazing people whom you must visit. They are called the Mangbetu people, and they live near Lake Rudolph in Central Africa. They are a beautiful, aristocratic people. And what they don't know about the universe is just not worth knowing. The Mangbetu people believe that an elongated skull with a flattened forehead pleases the gods. They flatten the skulls of their children, causing constant headaches to the child, even when the child has grown into adulthood. And I asked a beautiful Mangbetu woman, "Madam, why do you torture your children this way?" The woman, the wife of a senior chief, said to me, "Look, the gods want us to be like this."
The story that you're telling, Credo, from the African perspective, is it in effect the same story as told in the tens of thousands of clay tablets found in what we now call Iraq, who become known as the Sumerian tablets, that talk about a race of gods called the Anunnaki, who came in and brought knowledge, ruled the people, and interbred with them?
Yes.
Do you say, therefore, that the Anunnaki in those stories that have increasingly, of course, been translated in a number of books, yes, they were reptilian, you say?
Say, all I do know is this, that here in South Africa, amongst the Xhosa people, amongst the Zulu people, there are beings who are very revered even now, and they are called Amanuna or Amanono. Amanono is Zulu, Amanuna is Xhosa. Now these beings are godlike beings, we are told. They can change their faces. They can change their appearance.
They can shapeshift.
Yes, sir. They are shape shifters. A manuna, now if a Xhosa man has married a very beautiful wife, a wife whose face seems to change every day, he teases that wife by calling her his inuna, linuna lam. In other words, a shape shifter. Say, it is said that the people who are closest to the hearts of the Manuna gods are women. And why? Because the women give to the Manuna the power of, they worship the Manuna, they hero worship them, which explains why Nefertiti wanted herself to look like one of them, and her children too. She was actually hero worshipping these creatures, and the how you say, women say, are copycats, and I'm not being sexist when I say this. Women will copycat any being that they think is supreme.
In Egypt also, you have the python-like headdresses, which are pretty obvious when you look at them, that the pharaohs were connected with.
Yes, sir. And the reptile has played an unusually strange part in the culture of all African tribes. For example, it is my suspicion, sir, that we black people of Southern Africa are going to be deprived of our nationhood in the very near future, and that we are going to be ruled by people of Uganda. But wait, what is the real meaning of the word Baganda? Baganda. And what is the creature that you see depicted on the walls of houses and on the roofs of houses of some of the greatest empires in Africa? It is the python. There was a golden python which was used as a decoration on the roof of the house in which the king of Benin, the Oba, lived. Zulu people revere the mamba, a very terrible snake. Zulu people revere other snakes as well. And in Venda, in the northern Transvaal, the Venda people regard the snake as well as the crocodile as sacred. And they, even today, their girls dance at initiation, a long, rather sinuous dance representing the movements of a python. And they call that dance the Domba dance. And Domba is the ancient name for a female python.
Well, wherever you look, all over the world, whether it's the Maya of Central America, you look at South America, Africa, anywhere, the symbolism of the snake, the crocodile, the representation of the reptilian is there. You go into Europe, and the Illuminati created cathedrals like Notre Dame in Paris. You've got the stately homes of the aristocracy, etc., with the gargoyles, the reptilian figures. It's been in our face, but we just somehow have had a blind spot to see it.
We human beings have idolized the reptile since the very supposed birth of our history. Go even further, much further. What was the creature which was honored by the ancient Greeks in their Delphic oracle? The python. What is the creature that stands next to the figures of the goddess Athena? The python. No matter where you look, go to China, where I once went. Who are the principal characters who brought wisdom to humankind? Creatures, part snake and part human being. One of whom I remember correctly was called Nu, a word which occurs also in Africa. And her brother was Kwa, and sometimes it's turned into one creature, Nukwa, she. Everywhere we human beings have sacrificed our dignity as a species and attributed great intellect and great glory to reptiles, tortoises, turtles, lizards, snakes. Why? And even now, our fascination with the reptile and the amphibian has not stopped. In fact, it's growing. The popularity of all those dinosaurs, in cartoon as well as in serious form, it makes me uneasy.
If we could just pick up this line of bloodlines, which the Sumerian tablets talk about, which you talk about, the interbreeding of humanity, and how the accounts explain that these crossbreeds were put into the positions of royal ruling power, almost as like demigods, middlemen between the gods, the Chitahuli, the reptiles, and the people. Those bloodlines, in my own research, became the European royal families and aristocracy, and today are the ruling, banking, business, and political and royal lines of the world. And the genealogy supports this increasingly. Is there a tradition also that the royal lines of Africa go back to the same source?
Please, you don't have to believe me. go to Rwanda and there talk to the people there, they will tell you that the founding ancestors of their dynasties, the first kings who came from the sky, and they were called Imanugela, the ascending ones. Say, many African tribes believe that when the gods came down from the sky, they found human beings very stupid. And the human beings could not come before the gods in order to be taught. So what the gods did, and this is a story that you also find amongst the Dogoni people in West Africa, because the human beings were afraid of approaching these reptile gods. The reptile gods cold-bloodedly slaughtered one of their number and shed out its flesh with a specially gathered crowd of human beings. And these human beings then became the ancestors of our first great kings. Now say, African kings jealously guarded their blood.
If the royal lines of Africa claim descendants from the same source, basically, have those lines interbred as obsessively as the European aristocracy and royal family, and not bred outside of those lines?
Yes, sir. Royalty had to marry royalty. That was one of the strictest laws in ancient times.
Which is obviously where we get the term, the divine right of kings from. It's not actually God, it's actually the gods.
Yes, sir, yes. Royalty intermarried with royalty. You were not allowed to take a commoner as your senior wife if you were a king. You could take commoners after your senior wife.
Once the genetics has been achieved.
Yes, sir. Now, another thing, it is like the Sangomas. Very strictly speaking, a Sangoma who was sometimes viewed as a king or a queen was not allowed to marry outside her caste or his caste. Sangoma had to marry Sangoma, otherwise the non-Sangoma blood would pollute the god blood inside the Sangoma.
The lady that I've quoted in my books, Cathy O'Brien, who wrote her own book, Transformation of America, about being a mind-controlled slave of the American elite, she talks in there about seeing George Bush as president and vice president shapeshift into a reptile. And so many other people have told me this story of world leaders today changing into reptiles in front of their eyes and then changing back again. And Miguel de la Madrid, the president of Mexico at the time of George Bush, said to Cathy O'Brien, as she quotes in her book, that a reptilian extraterrestrial race interbred with the ancient Central American people because they needed to create bloodlines through which they could operate.
Yes.
And he said that these bloodlines were, in effect, today's world leaders. Does it fit with your knowledge, Credo, that the royal lines of the Chitahuli reptilian human interbreeding that become the demigods and the royal families, etc., that they have gone on in Africa, as well as the rest of the world, to become the ruling lines and the ruling people of these countries?
Yes, many of them have. In fact, some of Africa's most terrible warmongers men who have drenched large areas of Africa in unnecessary blood and suffering, are directly descended from some of our greatest emperors of 600, 500, or even 1,000 years ago.
Just as the American presidents are.
Say, I would like to tell you about a man called Jonas Savimbi. Jonas Savimbi is a descendant of some of the greatest Angola kings. In fact, the entire land called Angola was a breeding place of kingship in Africa. The word Ngola means a king, and Angola means land of many kings.
I must say, the way that the evidence that I'm uncovering is going, and it's going there very fast, and it syncs so much with what you're saying, is that a race from the stars, a reptilian race, interbred with humanity, they created crossbreed bloodlines, which became the middlemen, the demigods, the royal kings and lines and ruling power in the ancient world. And through interbreeding has become the presidents, the ruling people at the top of the power structures of banking, of politics, of the military, of all areas of our lives, of business, all of it. Is that the way that you have seen it yourself?
Yes, sir. You know, Mr. Icke, I wish for one moment I could contradict you. But for the last 40 years, I have observed an extremely disconcerting phenomenon in South Africa and in other parts of Africa as well. And this is the phenomenon. You find a rising black leader, a real leader amongst men, a ferocious activist for the rights of his people. This man starts something, whether it's a revolution or whatever, he starts it. And you look at his ancestry, because in Africa we look very closely at a man's ancestry. And you find that this man is nothing. Although he is doing such great deeds, he is actually a descendant of very peasant people. Ow. And you are worried. And all of a sudden, this black man will come to a sudden violent end, and a person who is totally new will take his place. And when you look at the ancestors of these people, this man, you find that he, or even she, is a person of very, very ancient African royalty. Now, let me show you. There was this war in Rhodesia, and many people got killed there. And there was a very fierce and dedicated general. His name was Tongogara. And Tongogara fought in Rhodesia. And just when victory was won, Tongogara was killed in a terrific explosion. Somebody put a bomb thing in his car and killed him very badly. But wait, Tongogara had been a descendant of a blacksmith. His surname, Tongo Gara, means powerful hammer. Now, who replaced Tongogara? a man called Robert Mugabe. Now you can't get more royal than that. Mugabe is descended from ancient Mashona kings, and what is more, he knows it. Always a leader is removed, and when the power really comes, a new leader descended from some faraway monarch or tribal chieftain 2 centuries or 3 centuries ago comes on the scene. Again and again there seems to be this particular force which elevates its descendants over ordinary human beings. I can give you hundreds of cases of this. Now say, talk about a tradition of shape shifting. African kings, even now, and even ordinary tribal chieftains, especially in times of crisis, often spread the story through the land that they are able to change shape at will. There was a time when the South African government created the various Bantu homelands. And these homelands were ruled by those tribal chiefs who were agreeable to the apartheid system. Now, some of these chiefs were very unpopular with the people on the ground. And so, to build a charisma around themselves, these chiefs used to tell people that they are capable of changing shape at will. It was spoken about a certain African chief in the Transkei who became one of the first rulers of one of several black homelands there, that one day his enemies were looking for him to assassinate him, and when they broke into his house, they found a huge lion sitting on the floor, and this lion growled at them. And because of that story, because even today word of mouth is a very powerful media of communication in black communities, all enemies of that particular chief left him well alone because they feared his shape-changing powers.
The final question on this particular video, Credo,
Yes,
because we've got a lot more to say on others. Why is it that if the Chitahuli are all around us, which I certainly feel they are, and they're operating for certain bloodlines, now some people see them shapeshift. That's absolutely without doubt. I mean, so many people I've met all over the world have seen it. Into reptiles and then back again, the George Bushes, the Henry Kissingers, these key people. Why don't most people see it?
First of all, sir, I have said to you, Mr. Icke, that we human beings have got a blind spot in our brains. And this is what the Chitahuli and other alien nasty boys are exploiting. Look, sir, if we are a crowd and we are standing on a city street, we will see a man suddenly grow an extra arm. And many, many of us will see that, but will refuse to accept what they have seen. I have seen, sir, people going through severe trauma in train accidents, in car accidents, but they refuse to accept what they went through. I have seen women who have been raped several times, ferociously refusing to admit what they underwent. I've seen it many times. And these alien creatures know our weakness. They know that very often we human beings tend to censor what we see. If you are an educated professor and you see a spook, your educated mind will refuse to accept what it has seen. You will reject it and throw it to the back burner of your brain, and it will stay there. Hundreds of us see very strange things every day, but we refuse to accept what we see. Say, one of the things that a trainee Sangoma has got to learn, it is the ability to see. If I am standing here and looking at that bush over there, and I see something odd there, I must know what I've seen. But wait, sir, there is something else, something very, 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 very important, which I and many other thinkers in Africa have found. Mr. Icke, whenever you talk about such things, people call you paranoid. Mm-hmm. But no, you are really more sane than they really are. Say, there are certain vaccination things that are done to our children which rob them of the ability of seeing spiritual entities. Believe me, I can prove this. In Zululand, we were sometimes called before our chiefs, our inkos, and we were told that there is a great smallpox coming to the land and that all children must be vaccinated. Do you know that my mother's father, my grandfather, used to dodge that? He said that the white man's mjovo, the white man's vaccination, makes you blind. And if you are to look after my cattle, you must not go to the trading store to get your vaccination. But wait, the school inspectors used to come into the land and check each child for signs of vaccination or lack of it. Now, do you know what we used to do, Mr. David Icke? Our grandmothers used to give us great pain in order to save our spiritual eyes. They used to heat grains of maize, and then they would heat this grain of maize, and using a piece of wood as tweezers, place it firmly against the skin of the child. So when the school inspector came, he saw these blisters and assumed that the child had been vaccinated, but in fact it had not. And this was done to us many, many times. And I noticed that school children in mission schools who had been vaccinated for smallpox or for measles could not see spiritual entities at all. A ndondo, that is a flying saucer, a spuputeg, would fly through the sky at great speed and be seen by many men and women. But the child who had been vaccinated would see nothing. And I noticed this hundreds of times.
Well, what you've just said about the vaccines and their effect on shutting us down spiritually and multidimensionally is fantastic, given that no matter what your background, creed, culture, parents on every inch of the planet almost are being pressurized to have their children vaccinated more and more and more. And to summarize what you've been saying, and indeed, it's so much in line with what I've come to the conclusion about as well. An extraterrestrial race, reptilian race, disconnected us from our true magnificent senses in a long, long ancient world. They've been manipulating us ever since, and the more that time has passed, the less we've realized this is going on. And now we're at a point where we are in a prison without bars, a massive prison, and we don't even know we're in prison. We don't even know the jailers are. Indeed, when the jailers are exposed, people just laugh and ridicule and all that stuff. So we're in an unbelievable situation. And we're in a jail we deny we're in. And there are jailers we deny exist. And we call it freedom.
Yes, sir. Yes. You know, Mr. David, one of the reasons why I've joined forces with you is because I have serious reason to believe, and I will repeat these words until somebody shuts my mouth in death. I have serious reason to believe that on this planet, things are coming to a head, and our invisible jailers are going to fight tooth and nail to prevent this. Say, our people say that the blackest night often heralds the brightest dawn. The human being, captive as he is, slave as it is trying to fight back, sir. And this is where the crunch is going to come. I believe that we are not far away from the bloodiest crunch in the world. And I will tell you, my visions tell me that we are going to be struck with the most terrible sword of all, the sword of money, sir. Something is going to be done to money which will bring us all to the level of beggars. And do you know why, sir? Let me tell you. I used to work for big game hunters in Kenya. And one of them was an Italian gentleman. This Italian gentleman was such a powerful hunter, a white hunter. He used to shoot 2 bull elephants a day in Kenya, and he used to celebrate the shooting with a huge bottle. He called it a magnum of wine. I remember him pouring some of the wine onto the heads of the dead elephants. And then one day we went with this man to the land now called Rwanda, which used to be called Rwanda-Urundi. We went up the mountain, and there, accompanied by pygmies, he shot a gorilla, a huge ngangi with silver fur all along its back. And the great beast died so bravely that this Italian hunter started weeping like a woman. He fired us, told us that the job is finished, and he never hunted again. Sir, what I'm trying to tell you is this, that something inside us human beings is beginning to fight back against the Chitauri. Something inside us human beings is beginning to say no. And the Chitauri are going to drag us all right into hell itself in order to restore their power over us. Let me show you. Who would have thought in the 1950s, during the time of the Cold War, when everybody was expecting a bloody Third World War between Stalinist Russia and the Western nations, when British, American, and even Russian nuclear bombs were exploding all over the place, who would have thought that a few decades after that, there would come a time when a group of young men and women, the people of Greenpeace, would sail their ship, the Greenpeace Warrior, into a nuclear zone to prevent the French from testing one more atomic bomb. This tells us that something inside the human soul is fighting back. 40 years ago, it was once a very glamorous thing to kill animals. Today, a big game hunter like my Italian friend would never dare show himself in some hotels. He would be spat at and he would be beaten up by people because the hero of yesterday, the Bwana Banduki, the gun Bwana of 40 years ago, is today a murderer. Now, things are coming to a crunch. 40 years ago, nobody cared a damn about the environment. People did not even know that there existed such a thing as an environment or a food chain. Today, there are people who would rather lose their lives than not save a buck which is drowning in a river. A God is being born inside us, all of us. But herein lies the danger. We must be aware of the Chitauri. They are real entities. They leave scars on human bodies. They kill people. They are murdering South Africa even as we are talking now. Every word you and I are speaking now is spoken too late, Mr. David Icke. AIDS is rampaging through our communities. And I have found a new disease in Botswana, which nobody is talking about even. It is 20 times more vicious than AIDS. It is called Ebola. Oh my God. And we must please be aware. Let nobody laugh when we talk about conspiracy theories. But there is one thing, sir, that I beg that you and others like you should discard. Una momento, as they say in South America. Stop calling the conspiracy a theory, sir. Theories do not kill people, Mr. David Icke. Theories do not murder innocent children. Theories do not put multiple murderers of Kabila's stripe into power in countries.
Absolutely.
Theories are just ideas floating in the air. The conspiracy is real. It is there and it kills.
The staggeringly intelligent, the staggeringly wise, and the staggeringly knowledgeable Credo Mutwa. And his knowledge the world needs to know. Not only is Credo a man who has gathered this enormous knowledge together, he's a man with the courage and the foresight and the wisdom to know that the world needs to hear this, even though most of the world, particularly those who run the world, don't want anyone to hear this. But if we're going to be free, and we are, then we need to know all there is to know, and not just that which the few want us to think is the world, when a very different world is unfolding all around us every day. In the next video, we're going to be taking the story on with Credo and showing how these reptilian bloodlines and this Chitahuli, this reptilian group, expanded their power across the world, took over Africa and other great continents, and today are the ruling elite that controls planet Earth. And by knowing that, and by knowing how it's done and how it works, we can take control and power back into our lives from those who have controlled us and this planet for thousands of years. It's a great time to be alive. From Africa for now. Thank you, and thanks for listening to A Remarkable Man.